Good evening, everyone. I am Gautam Soni, practicing chartered accountant from Indore. On behalf of Chandigarh branch of NIRC of I would like to welcome you all for the webinar on standards on internal audit, covering standards 140, and 310. Well, wishing you all a very happy 2023. As you all are aware, the theme of our webinar is keeping pace with reforms. Well, as it is rightly said, the only thing that remains constant is change. And with all the reforms which our country is undergoing, it would be prudent to say that unless we keep ourselves updated and learned, it would be very difficult to keep pace with these reforms. Friends, we chartered accountants are amongst very few professionals who command the respect and trust from all the stakeholders of the society. And therefore, it is very important for us to continue delivering up to the high standards set by us. This is only possible when we keep ourselves updated. So today we have two eminent speakers for the webinar. In the first half, we have CN9R Kothari sir, who will speak on SI 140, which is governance, and 150, which is compliance with laws and regulations. And in the later half, we will have Harish Dua sir, who would enlighten us with SI 220 and 310. With this, I would request C. Anil Kakkar sir, Chairman of Chandigarh branch of NIRC of ICI, for his opening remarks. Over to you, Anil sir.
Thank you, Gautamji. Thanks a lot. Good evening to each and everyone present here. Respected learner viewers, first of all, I wish all of you a very happy new year. And I, on the behalf of Chandigarh branch, would like to thank CA Charanjot Nandaji, Central Council member from Northern Region, Chairman, and CA Gyanchand Mishraji, Central Council member from Central Region and Vice Chairman of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICI, for giving our branch the opportunity to host today's webinar on the standard on the internal audit, keeping pace with the reforms. I express my sincere gratitude to both the guest speakers of the day, CA Nayan Kothari ji and, of course, Harish Dua sir, for taking out their valuable time, precious time, to enlighten all of us with their expert knowledge on the topic assigned. As we all know that to discharge our day-to-day professional internal audit assignment, we should all have the knowledge of these accounting standards, these internal audit standards. So I am of the firm belief that from today's deliberations of both the speakers, we will have the addition to our knowledge from the sessions. Last but not the least, I welcome all the learner participants also, and thanks to the entire team of the Internal Audit Standard Boards of ICI for organizing today's seminar. Thank you very much. Stay updated, stay healthy. Thanks a lot. Over to Gautamji.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for your remarks. Now I would like to welcome CA Charanjot Singh Nanda sir. Well, I come from Central India, and I must say Nanda sir is a very known and respectable member of our institute, be it any part of the country. We have the privilege of learning from his vast knowledge on various occasions at different forums in the past as well. It is great to have you, sir. I would briefly like to introduce Nanda sir. He is presently the Central Council member of ICI and was also the CCM during 2004 to 2016. Presently, he is the chairman of Internal Audit Standard Boards of ICI, as well as the vice chairman of Banking, Financial Services and Insurance Committee. He has been chairman of various committees of ICI, including Women Members Empowerment Committee, Committee for Cooperatives and NPO Sectors, Professional Development Committee, and Committee on Banking, Insurance and Pensions, Committee on Banking, Financial Market and Investors Protection. Sir, I would like to thank you for organizing this webinar. Over to you, sir, for your opening remarks and comments.
Thanks a lot, Gautam Bhai, the chairman of Chandigarh branch, my younger brother, C. Anil Kakkar. Two of the very respected faculties, C. Nayan Kothari, again my younger brother, and Harish Duaji, my elder brother. Gautam Soni, who's from Indore, Shivani, Aarti, and all our Arun, all the officials of Internal Standard Board and technical support, Jay, and participants who have come here to go home more enlightened. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly honored to be amongst you. It's a great day. A great day, not only because it is my birthday, but a great day that we are holding a program on internal audit standards. I hold a very clear-cut view that profession shall only progress when our technical skills are at the top level. We need to all understand that honing of technical skills, introduction of CP hours by our institute, it is not prevalent anywhere. The basic purpose of introducing CP hour was to ensure that all of us are well equipped with the technical literature. Mr. Anil Kakkad very rightly said that if you want to discharge your duties in a diligent way, you need to be putting yourself at parlous to all the prevalent internal audit accounting standards. Internal audit is a sunrise industry where number of members are being inculcated, are being introduced to newer, greener pastures of practice. And this pasture, this practice would ultimately ensure that working and technical skills are an important part. Apart from technical skills, we need to have technology also on our side. A young member spoke to me 3 days back. He said, "Sir, we work very diligently, we put all our efforts, yet we are criticized." So I gave him the answer by way of a couplet, which I shall share with you. The couplet says, तारीफ की चाहत तो नाकाम लोगों की फितरत है, तारीफ की चाहत तो नाकाम लोगों की फितरत है, काबिल लोगों के तो दुश्मन भी कायल होते हैं. I request that inculcate in yourself a technical skill set to compete with all professionals across the board, across the globe, and you shall always emerge victorious. The board is totally inclined. Mr. Dua is the advisor to the board for International Standard Board and for Digital Accounting and Assurance Board. He's been putting his incessant efforts to ensure that we do a lot of value add to the membership. And I can say this thing with great pride that internal audit, I remember I came to the council in the year 2004. And the first responsibility I got from the then President, Mr. Sunil Goyal, was to chair the board. I'm the founder chairman of this board. And over the years, we have grown so much in size and technical content in auditing standards that now we are ranked as one of the best boards of ICI. I want to tell you all that we are there now, moving ahead to the government, to MCA, to ensure that these internal audit standards are mandated and they are there to add value to the professional activities undertaken, not only by the members or stakeholders, but by the regulator and government as well. So I will not stand between you and the two learned faculties. Thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me to give my keynote address. I'm really honored to be amongst you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the lovely words. I'm sure under your leadership, we'll continue to do well and we have our institute under really good hands. Now I would like to start with session 1. For that, we have standard on internal audit 140 regarding governance and standard on internal audit 150 regarding compliance with laws and regulations. Our speaker is CA Nayan R. Kothari sir. He is postgraduate of Commerce from MS University, Baroda, and a fellow member of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. His post-qualification certification course include forensic auditing and fraud detection and certification course on concurrent audit of banks. Mr. Kothari is a practicing chartered accountant based at Baroda since 2006. He is partner of Manoj Vipin and Company Chartered Accountants. His areas of practice include internal and statutory audits of SMEs and corporate, consultancy in the area of fraud investigation and forensic auditing, business restructuring and corporate finance planning. He is also doing consultancy in the area of direct and indirect taxation and company law matters. He was managing committee member of Baroda branch of WIRC of ICI for 8 years and was the past chairman of Baroda branch of WIRC of ICI. He also held the position of vice chairman, secretary, treasurer of Baroda branch of ICI and also the chairman. He is co-opted member of Research Committee of ICI New Delhi for the year 2021-22 and also the co-opted member of Banking, Insurance and Pension Committee. He is the regular faculty at certificate course of concurrent audit of bank branch of ICI and has addressed more than 75 batches across the nation so far. He is regular faculty for more than 75 batches at orientation and GMCS program for CS students organized by Baroda branch of WIRC of ICI and teaching technical subjects and also subject related to soft skills. Sir, we are truly delighted to have you here. I'm sure your learnings would be of great benefits to all the members present here. Request you to take charge of this session.
Thank you for wonderful welcome and introduction. Our beloved Chairman Sir, Dua Sir, Chairman of the branch, and Mr. Gautam, I thanks to you all for arranging such a wonderful program and considering me as one of the resource persons. As time is short and I have to cover two standards on internal audit, I'll straight come to this subject and share the PPT. Friends, before we get into the presentation and all, I must say the compendium on this, which has come out by the institute, is one of the very nicest book available or the publication available on the standards related to internal audit, and probably it is available even for download from our ICI website. So members are only recommended to go through this compendium and get the more details about this standard. As Nandaji earlier said, that it is the sunrise profession. Rather, sunrise has already begun as far as the internal audit is concerned. The moment you rise, you get awake and get into the journey, that is the sunrise for you, because that it is something, a function of the management, which at the larger level being outsourced or given to the internal auditors, and where the internal auditors very effectively contribute to the entire operating mechanism of the company. That is what is the internal audit, which we have been traditionally always told. Now, to further enhance the skill set of the internal auditors, to make them more effective, because they are well guided by very nicely drafted standards which are commensurating with the international standards on internal audit. They are taking care of the best practices being followed in the internal audit. Now we would be having more well guided internal auditors who shall discharge the internal audit function in much more efficient manner. So that is where the standards, and rather in general standardization of anything, shall help the professionals and the stakeholder. Those primarily are our clients. So that is what is, friends, according to me, the background related to standards, which had been given for a very deep subject, very wide subject called internal audit. Internal audit could be a very smaller one where you are just commenting on various accounting related issues, or maybe a particular format where few points are being taken care, and it could be as wide, as large as one can think or imagine, and may extend to functions, departments, areas beyond even accounting, finance, taxation, whatever are the traditional areas. So internal audit is some very, very huge and wide subject. And when we have got such a well-drafted standards to give us clarity about meanings, methodologies, general meaning of the subjects, particular meaning of the subject, how the legal system in India is requiring certain points to be complied with. Then two very, very important paragraph. One, responsibility of the management, and what will be the responsibility of the auditor, along with explanatory notes. So this is how the internal audit standards are framed, like SA 140, which talks about the standard related to governance. So there, first the governance is defined, relevance, important, meaning, what's the responsibility of the management with respect to governance, what are the legal views, and shall be the duty of internal auditor as far as the governance is concerned. And to understand, implement, and take it forward, there has been given certain explanatory notes. The PPT primarily is merely a summarization of the standards we have with us. In the limited possible time, I'll try to read some of the relevant paragraphs like auditor responsibility and all, line to line, and will give brief background of the other paragraphs and keep going. We talk first about the internal audit standards. that's issued by the ICAI, our alma mater, providing guidance for members, all important aspect related to the internal audit, so that one can adopt the best practices in providing the service of internal audit. It will guide, assist providing confidence in the quality and consistency which an internal auditor can be conducting his work, and it will help to deliver the internal auditor service in the very much efficient and way. Background purpose of these standards on internal audit is establish requirement and benchmarks against which our performance as an internal auditors be measured, right? So this is what is a little background about the standards on internal audit. Further, the SIAs are issued under the authority of the Council of the ICI. It's aimed to codify the best practices in prevailing, setting out the benchmark. Standards, guidance, note, and clarifications are issued on time to time as and when needed. Scope. So these standards shall apply wherever the internal audit is carried out. Further, it also states internal audit is independent management function which involves continuous ethical appraisal of the functioning of the entity with a view to suggesting the improvement there, which shall in turn add value to strengthen overall governance mechanism of the entity, including entity's strategic risk management, internal control. This all is the responsibility of the management, but as a third party independent person in helping the management, if I enter there as internal auditor, where I am following and guided by these standards, these benchmarks, these best practices, it shall certainly put me into a position where I'm just not checking the compliances or the accounting entries, but I am at a position as an internal auditor to give the suggestions. Many places it happens so. The internal audit function is merely limited to, kind of a tick marking or something like that. But no, friends, internal auditor is always allowed to and probably has to give suggestion to the management. In turn, the entire control mechanism and the governance mechanism at the end of the stakeholder, the client, the auditee shall improve. This is what is the internal audit function. Now, coming to two standards which I am supposed to take up, both of them in a brief. There is one, governance. How does the company functions? And the another one which talks about law and regulation, again primarily the responsibility of the management to comply with them. So in both the standards, first we will see what governance is. Second standard, we will see what are the legal points related to the law and compliance. Second part of both the standards shall have briefly listed down the responsibility of the manager and then responsibility of the auditor, supported by explanatory note. This is what is the framework of the standard or the format of the standard. Paragraphs are maintained in this particular ones. If we look at the heading of the standard on internal auditing SIA 140, governance issued by the ICI's council should be read in conjunction with reference to the standards on internal audit framework, governing the internal audit and basic principle of the internal audit, which is of course issued by the ICI. Governance, what is it? The key concept in internal audit. These standards seek to clarify concept I already mentioned, a responsibility of both internal auditor, management, board, those who are charged with the governance, the audit committee, stakeholder. Why? With respect to governance, keeping in mind legal, regulatory, and auditors' professional obligations. Further, definition of the internal audit in the framework governing the internal audit that indicate providing independent assurance on effectiveness of internal. That's the responsibility of management. The internal controls are there as a part of an exercise called risk management process. It shall enhance the governance, in turn shall achieve the overall objective of the organization as a key expectation. This definition on internal audit elaborates the term governance by clarifying how this is critical operation of the company and it shall fulfill the expectation of the various stakeholders. It shall apply to all internal audit conducted where the governance activity and framework related to governance is the subject matter of the audit that's being assessed, evaluated, reported by the internal. This is what is the introductory part related to this standard. I'm not repeating it further because one or other place this would be further being discussed. Objectives. The purpose for introducing this particular standard, providing very nicely drafted word, common terminology. Providing common terminology in governance. Why? To prevent ambiguity, confusion on the. Then explaining the responsibility of the board of director and the management audit committee with regard to governance as mandated by law. And then, of course, the internal auditor specifying the responsibilities of the internal auditor, particularly, especially when he is providing independent assurance on governance framework. Overall objective of the standard is to clarify responsibility of the management, audit committee, board of director, internal auditor towards all the stakeholders, those may be your internal as well as the external, and the requirement which need to be met to assess, evaluate, report, and provide independent assurance by the internal auditor over the governance framework, which is the responsibility of management. Right. Further, if we get into the definition in particular given by the standard, governance is defined as set of relationships between company and its various stakeholders, both internal and external. And this governance shall provide the structure through which company's objectives are achieved. The relationship and structure will help guide the behavior of individual and groups in the right direction. Following are well accepted underpinnings of the good governance, integrity and accountability, trust and equity, transparency and justice. Governance shall ensure that everyone is aligned to the best interest of the organization and they are doing what they are supposed to. Why? To achieve the objective of organization. Now, governance framework that refers to the whole structure, system, process that are put in place to organize the various governance activities to integrate them seamlessly into the organization. Governance framework together, ultimately targeting for the betterment of the organization in terms of the compliance with the. Further, if we get into the more bullet points, the governance activities, they shall be forming part of the framework designed to enhance organization's ability amongst other. Ability they need to enhance, provide strategy, leadership, direction, nature, a culture of the value and ethics which the organization as a whole is following. Sensitivity to multiple stakeholder interests, internal, external, outsider, everybody. Promoting collaborative decision making, inclusive decision making, providing structure and design to organization resource and their deployment, preventing undue concentration of the power with the few people in the or of the management. They shall encourage the risk-based prioritization, consistency, and effective efficiency in business process. They shall further help support in resource development in the area of the good governance. Exercise judicious monitoring and oversighting of the business and individual performance and shall ensure full and transparent communication and reporting. These all initiatives generally form part of entity level control, commonly known as ELC, which are essential to overall internal audit agenda. So first, we have seen the definition of governance as well as the governance mechanism. Then what all should be part of a good governance activity? They are listed down over here, and that's the responsibility of the management, and they are part of ELC level. We go further. Responsibility part that I already mentioned in the beginning. Major responsibility, as we already know from the basic standard of accounting, that SA 200, that may it be books of accounts, may it be accounting standards, may it be financial reporting framework in case of the standard on auditing. And similarly over here, when I'm talking about governance, when I shall be again talking about law and regulation, the primary responsibility for selecting, implementing, and ensuring it's being continuously followed and implemented is primary responsibility is always of the management. So the responsibility of the board of directors in the area of governance is generally established by prevailing law of the nation. The responsibility of the management is established by the both prevailing laws, oversight of the board of directors. Prevailing law, of course, the Companies Act 2013, that imposes overall responsibility on the board of directors with regard to the governance, specifically towards company's stakeholder. Particular section 166 of directors' duties. It states like this in it subsection: a director of the company shall act in good faith in order to promote the object of the company for the benefit of its member as a whole and in the best interest of the company as well as the employee, the shareholder, community, and protection of the environment. Further, more specifically, the Schedule 4 of the Companies Act 2013, Board of Independent Director, there, Section 1, that guidelines on the professional conduct require them to, another subclause, assist the company in implementing the best corporate governance policy. So overall, as we already understand, that's the responsibility of the management. Further, these responsibilities are backed up by the legal provision. First, in general, regarding the director, and in particular, regarding the board of director. Earlier, when the word came stakeholder into bracket, it was mentioned external and internal. As in subsection 2, you can see the list of internal stakeholders starting from the employee till the most external stakeholder, the overall environment and the society. Where do we stand with our whatever other commercial activity which we further? There are LODR, which is applicable to the listed companies as per the SEBI listing obligation and disclosure requirement regulation 2015. The board of directors of the company have additional responsibility on governance. Chapter 2 of regulation 4.2 subclause F of this LODR mandates the responsibility of the board of directors as key functions of the board of directors monitoring the effectiveness of the listed entities governance practices and making changes which are needed. In addition, under the same regulation, it states the responsibility, the board of directors shall set a corporate culture, values by which executives throughout a group shall behave. So it is the LODR in case of the listed entity, it is the Companies Act for BOD as well as independent director creates a lot of legal responsibilities with respect to implementation and continuous following of the governance activity, best governance policies and standards. Further, LODR has an exhaustive list as per Schedule 2 corporate governance, which stipulates the various requirement and good governance practice in this area. Without enumerating them here, it is pertinent to note a few provisions which are the most relevant to the internal audit. One of them is Part C, Section A, the role of audit committee. What they mentioned there in the LODR with respect to the role of audit committee, it shall be reviewing with the management performance of whom statutory and internal auditors, as well as the internal control system which we have. Is it adequate or not? The audit committee shall review adequacy of internal audit function, if any, included in the structure of the internal audit department, staffing and seniority of the official who heads this department, if it is internally maintained, and reporting structure, what do they cover, what's the periodicity and frequency of the internal audit once it has been done by the outsourced agency like RCA firm. Further, the audit committee will do discussion with internal auditors of the significant findings and follow on the compliance or sorting out of those negative findings, if any. So now the another part, after in addition to the other people's responsibility, board, independent director, LODR, more particular responsibility are fixed for the audit committee as well. One more, the audit committee would be reviewing the findings of the internal audit investigation by the internal audit into the matter where there is suspected fraud or irregularity or a failure of internal control system of a material nature, and shall report the matters to the board. So the audit committee shall very closely would be working with the internal auditor. That can be the summarized point. If we go through all these sub clauses related to the responsibility of internal auditor, which is mentioned in Part C of Section B. Further, again about the audit committee, they shall mandatorily review internal audit reports relating to internal control weakness, appointment, removal, terms of remuneration of the chief internal auditor, that shall be also subject to review by audit. Hence, governance is seen as essential element of the business functioning and internal audit as a key element of governance. Therefore, see how both of them are interconnected. Governance, essential element for the business, internal audit, a key element for effective. Therefore, overall responsibility for developing, implementing, and monitoring the governance framework rests with the board of director and of course the management. What shall be the responsibility of the internal auditor? So the nature and extent of internal audit procedure to be conducted in the area of governance is dependent on framework in place, maturity of the processes, and where management has implemented the formal governance framework and unless specifically excluded from the scope of audit or technically he cannot do it, the internal auditor shall plan, perform internal audit procedure to evaluate what the design, implementation, and overall operating effectiveness of these governance framework, so that these internal auditors shall be able to provide an independent assurance to the management and those who are charged with the governance. These people are primarily responsible to establish this governance mechanism, and the auditor shall evaluate it from three angles: designing, implementation, and operation. Whether these governance mechanism suits to this particular company or not. Design, implemented, whether in the right and spirit it has been implemented, responsibilities are fixed or not, and is it continuously operating or kind of a one-day activity? Right? These three parameters the internal auditor shall check with respect to this governance mechanism, keeping in mind all the law and regulation which we have seen in the earlier slides, and he would be further giving his comment on the same. Further responsibility of the internal auditor, but no formal governance framework exists. Then internal auditor shall design and conduct the audit procedure with a view to highlight any exposure arising from the weak or absence of the governance activity and processes, and shall make recommendation to have implement, and if it is weaker, then to strengthen the procedures and thereby shall improve the governance. If it is there, what I'm supposed to do. If it is not there, or if it is little bit deeper, what I'm supposed to do. These points are mentioned into the paragraph called responsibility of the auditor, internal auditor, of course, where the independent assurance is required, the issuance of an audit opinion over the design, implementation, and overall effectiveness of the governance. This shall be undertaken in line with the requirement of ESI 110, which talks about the nature of assurance, especially with regard to the need of having a formal governance framework in place that shall be forming the basis of an such assurance. Further, internal auditor shall not assume any responsibility to manage or operate the governance framework. I am there to audit. I am there to check its design, implementation, and operation. Operating the governance framework is the responsibility of management. One should be very clear on. The focus of audit procedure is on the process of governance and not the outcome of the process. The governance process should be there, whatever could be the outcome. Such second guessing on questioning the action or decision of the governing bodies. It is not responsibility of the internal auditor to execute or resolve the governance related risks. Governance is there, yes or no or weak, your observation, your comments. How the governance should be or can be improved. But I cannot start operating it. I cannot start putting the risk and controls into the same. It's the responsibility of management, right? There are a few explanations given to understand these standards little more conveniently. Auditing the governance framework, where there's a formal governance framework is in place to be performed by the internal auditor shall be directed to ensure, amongst the others, the organization has designed the framework which consists with best in class, globally recognized framework. The organization has implemented various enabling mechanisms. They could be shared vision of the entire organization, mission, object, goals, target. They've established a code of conduct or the ethics and whistleblower mechanism, giving a very proper and fair treatment to whistleblowers. They act to identify the management and address the concerns, balance the need of the various stakeholders, could be both internal and external, through open communication and discussion mechanism. They shall form active and functional governing bodies with the defined agendas. Further, the shared organization design and structure with clearly defined roles and responsibility of these positions, delegated powers, authorities, risk-based system shall be deployed. It shall conduct the regular training program for the staff for developing the awareness and competency for the areas related to a good governance, continuous track of the business performance against the budget and goals should be done. They shall undertake active communication and periodic reporting of the governance matter with those who are charged with the governance and other stakeholders. The IA, internal auditor, shall review the governance system and process in place to evaluate whether, again, the same thing, they are there, yes. So are they operating effectively in the efficient manner? How can I say, are they helping to ensure full compliance? Then yes. Any shortcoming shall result in the recommendation from the improvement and suggestion on how to make the governance framework more effective and efficient in line with the stated. Sir, few more comments. Auditing of the governance activity and process where the management is not implemented. Earlier, there was the governance and auditor was commenting. Now, there is no formal framework of the governance, then internal auditor will conduct procedure over the various governance related to the process activity which may be present. These activity may be supported by certain enabling systems and processes and which may be recommended as desirable action to be undertaken by the management. Independent assurance over the governance framework. In a situation where written assurance report is being issued by the auditor, he shall consider the following while forming his opinion. linkage of governance framework with other frameworks such as risk, compliance, fraud, IT exists or not, system of compliance, certification on governance matter, and the process in place for self-assessment and certification from the governance owners as a part of the continuous system and compliance. This standard is yet to be notified as far as the effective date is concerned, right? This was about the standard related to the compliance, related to the governance and its compliance, responsibility of the management and auditor very clearly defined. The next one in line that talks about compliance with law and regulation. It is exactly going in the similar line and the sequence of discussion as we saw in the governance. There are law regulations are to be identified first and certainly to be complied with. Who shall comply? Who shall ensure a mechanism to comply with them? Of course, the management. What shall be of the duty of the internal auditor? See whether the compliance is there or not, what framework are they following, and as per the requirement of that framework, if anything is missing out, he would be putting up his own observation, comments to the management, and of course, where required, he would be giving the suggestion. So exactly in the same lines, at that time, in the earlier standard, the point, the center was governance. Here, the point, the center thought is compliance with law and regulation, right? So let's read the introduction of this. Compliance is, of course, very key concept, and the standard shall clarify both concept of the compliance and responsibility of both internal auditor, management, other stakeholders. With reference to, with respect to what? CLR, compliance with the law and regulation in line with the professional definition. Framework governing the internal audit indicates providing independent assurance on the effectiveness of internal control, risk management process to enhance the governance and achieve organization objective as a key expectation from internal. This definition further elaborates on the term governance by clarifying how it includes compliance with the law and regulation. So, standards shall apply all the internal audit conducted where compliance activity in the framework is subject matter audit being assessed, evaluated, and reported by the internal auditor. Further, objective purpose. Providing a common terminology by defining compliance, preventing ambiguity, responsibility of the board of directors, responsibility of the internal audit, and overall objective of the standard is to clarify responsibility of the management and auditor over compliance with law and regulation and the requirements which needs to be met to assess, evaluate, report, and provide independent assurance by the internal auditor over the compliance, overall compliance framework at the end. What does this CLR, compliance with the law and regulation, means? Compliance is a term used to describe the process of following in letter and spirit. Just merely not following, but following with pure compliance framework by heart, by letter and spirit, the applicable law and regulation. Any act which contrarily to the laid down law and regulation, either commission and performed intentionally or unintentionally, is non-compliance and sometimes violation of law and regulation. And once it is not complied with, once it is violated, it shall result in fines, penalty, litigation, or any other consequence. Compliance framework refers to the whole structure, system, process put in place to organize the various compliance activities and to integrate them seamlessly into the organization. Compliance activity forming part of the framework are designed to enhance organizations' ability amongst others, which talks about providing strategy, leadership, and direction for the compliance, establishing the overall culture of the compliance throughout the organization. Everybody is very sincere about the compliances. They know the law and regulation and the cost of non-compliance, or rather they're very serious about making the compliance. They don't take it casually, I have to say. Providing the organizational structure for assessing the compliance resource and defining their roles and responsibility. Capture and maintain comprehensive database of all compliances required. You should know the law, regulation, compliances, due dates, etc. Documentation to be maintained. And like you have got the Provident Funds Act, you have got the Bonus Act. So Bonus Act require various registers are to be maintained in addition to the timely payment of bonus. Right? So these all list and the database of the compliance should be very well clear with you. Friends, certain non-compliance with the law and regulation are such serious that might result into going concern of the entity's threat. It might result into a threat into the going concern entity. Like in manufacturing facilities, you have got the boilers. There is the separate law related to the boiler and authority called Register of Boilers at the state level. Unless the compliances are being made there with respect to the fitness certificate, every year renewal of these and all, there would be a chance that if it is not properly complied with, the going concern of the entity may suffer. GPCB, like every state has got a pollution control board. So non-compliance with the pollution control norms are also very serious non-compliance or violation. So this has to be very, very strongly taken up. And for that, you should know the list, the comprehensive database of the compliances of the various law and regulation applicable. Then encouraging the risk-based time prioritization, effective completion of the compliances which all are required. Ensure expertise and competence in the area of compliances. Exercise continuous monitoring and oversighting on the compliance are completed or not. Further, internal auditor shall be doing periodic communication of the compliance matter and formal reporting of the compliance status to the management and those who are charged. If in a nutshell, I have to say about the responsibility of the management, Companies Act has defined the same. Similarly, functions of the company secretaries, which are mentioned in the Companies Act, has also defined that or made it very clear about the responsibility. As the time is less, I shall not be reading out the responsibility of the board, but I certainly would like to read out the responsibility of the auditor. Listed company, there are requirement of the LODR more or less in lines with the governance which we have seen. In case of the listed company, the last bullet point which you can see, you have to appoint a compliance officer who shall be a qualified company secretary. Further, board of director will periodically review the same. CEO, CFO shall be responsible. Hence, compliance is seen as the essential element of the business function, which will serve consequence and penalties from non-compliance. Therefore, overall responsibility for developing, implementing, and monitoring what compliance framework is of rests with the board and the management. Now coming to the important portion, responsibility of the internal audit. Nature and extent of the internal procedure to be conducted in the area of the compliance depends upon what does the management do first, what type of framework have they got in place. Are the processes are mature enough to ensure compliances, whether the management has implemented a formal compliance framework, and unless specifically excluded from your scope or practically not able to do it, the auditor, internal audit shall plan, perform the internal audit procedure to evaluate same three things: design, implementation, and operative effectiveness of the framework which takes care of the compliance, so as to provide an independent assurance by the internal auditor with respect to the compliance to whom the management and those who are charged with the government. Similarly, there is no formal compliance framework exists, then he shall conduct the auditing procedure with you to highlight any exposure arising out of weak or absence of these compliance. Where he is supposed to give an independent assurance, then he will be undertaking these entire assignment with the reference of SIA 110. Further, responsibility of the internal auditor. While primary objective of the IA is to strengthen the system and procedure of the compliance, there may be instances where he would be asked to undertake compliance audit with a primary objective to identify any instance of the non-compliance. In these kind of situations where no formal compliance framework is in place, the internal auditor may not be able to provide the written opinion, which is requirement of S110. Nevertheless, summary of the finding shall be possible, listing down what all instances of the non-compliance which the auditor has identified as a result of the procedure which he has taken. The finding shall be reported along with procedure summary. By any chance, if there was any limitation, internal auditor shall not assume responsibility to manage or operate the compliance. It's the responsibility of management. You are not supposed to operate the same, right? Like you are not supposed to act capacity of the compliance officer. That's the responsibility of the management to appoint the one, right? He has to take the ownership. He's not supposed to take the ownership of any of these systems, right? So this is what, even not the decision making or any other responsibility to resolve the issue. These all are the responsibility of the management. You need to see their existence of the framework, compliance done or not. No framework, what is the level of the compliance? And if at all independent view has to be given, see whether it is possible or not, as stated in the standard. A couple of notes, explanatory comments. Where there is the formal compliance framework is in place, work would be done to ensure, amongst other, that organization has designed the framework consistent with best-in-class and globally acclaimed recognized framework, and further has implemented the mechanism with respect to compliance policy, tone to the top, designed the structure, identified the law, regulation, database. Further, they have regularly conducted the training programs. Robust compliance system has been implemented with the help of technology, continuous track of the performance against the compliance targets and goals. They have established timely communication and periodic reporting system, compliance system, and procedure in place. They are operating in the effective and efficient manner so that the entire compliance is done or it is fully complete. Any shortcoming that shall result in recommendation for improvement by the internal auditor. Independent assurance, I'll not be touching upon that. And this is it from my side as far as both the standards are concerned. Moderator, sir, if there is any query or the question, I'm ready to take up. But these are standards which are yet to be notified and implemented. But to the best extent possible, I tried to do a kind of a summarized manner discussion regarding both of them. So this is it from my side. Thank you. Thank you very much, friends.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for the wonderful session. With ever increasing scrutiny upon the auditors, these two standards are really critical in discharging our responsibility as internal auditor. These two standards have certainly made us learn about our duties and responsibilities as well as that of the management. I'm sure all the participants have thoroughly learned with these sessions, and if they have any questions, I will certainly be coming up with for you. Once again, I would like to thank you for taking out time out of your busy schedule for the betterment of our profession. Thank you so much, sir. Well, after learning these two standards, the next two are SIA 220 regarding conducting overall internal audit planning and SIA 310 planning the internal audit assignment. Sir, if I were to ask what constitutes the most important part of any audit, it would certainly be the planning. If the audit is properly planned, half the job is done. On the other hand, an unplanned audit can bring serious consequences. For learning about these two standards, we are truly delighted to have Harish Dua, sir. Mr. Dua is a veteran in internal audit work, and his experience will certainly help all the participants in discharging their duties more diligently. Before handing over the session to Harish Dua sir, I would like to give a brief introduction about him. Mr. Dua is an audit and business professional with over 40 years of experience in the area of governance, risk, and compliance. He specializes in the area of ethics, internal audit, and investigations. He is a fellow chartered accountant from England, a certified public accountant from USA, and holds an MBA from University of Connecticut, USA. Mr. Dua is also a certified fraud examiner from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners and a member of Institute of Internal Auditors. Mr. Dua started his career in London, where he spent first 10 of his formative years. Thereafter, he spent the next decade in the USA working with PwC and Pitney Bowes, prior to returning to India 25 years ago. In India, he has worked with few marquee companies like PepsiCo, Bharti Airtel, SRF, and Jindal Steel and Power, along with a brief stint as CEO of the Institute of Forensic Accounting and Investigative Audit. His last assignment was with JSPL as acting CFO after serving as President Internal Audit for 3 years. Mr. Dua is now practicing as an independent advisor. Currently, he is serving as an advisor with the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, assisting in the preparation of standards on internal auditing and forensic accounting, in the preparation of educational courses and training programs covering the subject of internal audit, risk management, and forensic accounting and investigation. He's also visiting faculty at various business schools and educant faculty at All India Management Association on the subject of forensic audit. Sir,
we can stop there because it will go on and on.
No. Having such a
there's no need to carry on. I think everybody's got a gist.
Yes, sir. Sir, over to you, sir, for the session, sir.
Thank you so much, Gautam. Thank you very much. And I want to thank CA Anil Kakkarji and the Chandigarh branch for inviting me. And also, I want to compliment Nayan Kothari for giving a wonderful presentation. It was a delight to hear you speak, Mr. CA Kothari-ji. And it's a great topic for me. I have been very closely involved in fact, in the process of putting these standards together. I was very honored to be invited by the institute to help out in the drafting of these standards. So this whole subject is very passionate. I'm very passionate about the whole subject, and it's wonderful to see excellent practitioners like Gautam and Nayan Kothari ji and Anil ji to come and speak about these subjects. I will try and do my little bit in sharing my learnings with you. I know these standards can get somewhat dry as a subject matter, but for those of you who are into the profession, I think it's very wonderful to occasionally stop and discuss these standards because they keep us in the right direction. For example, the two subject matters that were discussed by Nayan Kothari can be somewhat, what I would say, boring or dry. Governance and compliance. At many a times we get a little bogged down with them. But if you were alert and if you were to take away something from the two subjects, for example, that is covered, you should remember that we as practitioners should be careful in unnecessarily assuming the job of management. Okay, many a times we get thrust upon us these subjects because not very many people in the company are taking care of these important matters like governance and compliance. So what they say is, "Arey yaar, ye auditor aa raha hai na, ये संभाल लेगा, अगर कोई गड़बड़ है तो वो हमें बता देगा, हम ठीक कर देंगे." Okay, I hope you guys don't mind me switching into Hindi. Many a times I do this gear changing without realizing because I think it seems to connect well with the audience. So forgive me for getting into Hindi and English and things like that. But if you don't want me to do it, I'll stick to English. That's not a problem. Anyway, getting back to the subject. See, the important points that Mr. Kothari made was that we many times fall in this trap of finding violations, for example, and then telling management, okay, fix these violations. See, the problem is that's not really our job. What the standards are saying is that we should highlight those violations as examples of where the process is broken, because it's the job of the compliance officer to make sure that the compliance are happening in the first place. And if we, during our audit, are finding those violations, then it's our job to say, well, look, your process is broken somewhere upstream. Fix the process so that those violations don't keep happening over and over again. And our job should be to draft our recommendations that are addressing the root cause of the problem that allow the violations to happen in the first place. And that is the beauty of these new standards that have come. They're really helping the auditor to get his frame of mind correct and on the right track, that it's your job to help the organizations to strengthen the process and to prevent problems from happening, not to just find a few things, violations, and make a big deal about them. Because many a times we feel that our job is to find fault and to report it so that we stay relevant. That's not our job, friends. Our job is to make sure that if we find some violations, we find out why the company's processes are broken and why those violations are happening in the first place. And that is, I wanted to just take this moment to reinforce what C. Kothari has already discussed with you, so that it kind of sinks in well with you, so that when you switch off today and go to your day-to-day works tomorrow onwards, you remember at least a few important points. And the other beautiful thing he covered is give you a good background on these standards. And I want to also take one moment to pause and emphasize one other point that he covered with regard to the background on the standards, and that these standards are principle driven. Okay, the job of the standards is basically to tell you what is expected of a professional when he's doing his audit work, not the how. Okay, so these standards are very brief. They're 4 or 5 pages each. Each standard is no more than maybe 4 or 5 pages, and its focus primarily is to tell you what we have to do when we do any audit. Of course, the guidance notes are coming later on that will really give you a lot more guidance on the how, so that you know how the audit work has to be done. And I will, in my presentation, focus on the standards because that is the subject matter of the discussion today. I will cover the 2 standards on planning, and I will talk about what these standards say as to what the professional has to keep in mind when he's doing his planning. The standards do not talk about the how, like I mentioned, because they will it's basically principle driven, and it's left to the professional to apply his own mind and judgment in terms of the how. So, for example, the planning standard will tell you what we need to do when we plan. The checklist of actual planning is not in the standard, because that will be part of the guidance notes that are there, that will be coming later on as we go along. Okay, so these are the 2 quick overall backgrounds I want to cover. I know we're pressed for time, and so I'm going to now go ahead and share my screen and make my presentation. And I will try to keep it in time so that we finish it in about half an hour, so that we can then have a meaningful Q&A later on, in case we still have any questions in your mind, and that's try to make it interactive. Gautam is going to help us, I think, with some questions that you may have in your mind and how you want to get some clarity. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. Gautam, can you just confirm for me? I'm putting it on full screen mode. And yes, I hope you can. Okay, great. So I'll jump into it. Basically, I'm going to be covering Starting with a quick overview, and I'll cover the two standards on planning, internal audit planning and assignment planning, and 220, 310 as you know. Okay, this cover is actually the old compendium. A recent one has just come. I think the latest one was flashed in front of your eyes by Kothari, and so I'll just carry on. Let me start with a quick quote from Alexander Graham Bell. I think everybody must have heard the name of this gentleman. He said, before anything else, preparation is the key to success. Okay, so we can't start any work unless and until we prepare well for it, because otherwise, if we do that, we'll just be floundering. इधर उधर घूमते रहेंगे, कहेंगे हमने जाना आगरा है, हम जयपुर पहुंच जाएंगे. ऐसे तो नहीं होना चाहिए ना. प्लानिंग करनी होती है. अगर हम ट्रैवल भी शुरू करते हैं तो हम प्लान बनाते हैं कैसे पहुंचना है, कि हमने फ्लाई करके जाना है, ड्राइव करके जाना है, अकेले जाना है कि गर्लफ्रेंड को लेके जाना है, and all that kind of stuff has to be discussed and deliberated, and then a plan has to be made. So that is the way we have to approach anything and everything we do. So general thoughts on planning. अरे भाई क्यों कर रहे हैं हम planning? Why are we even doing anything? हम तो यार, you throw me in the deep end, I can swim. That is the approach many of us do. Many a times, a lot of you are practicing CS. आपको टैक्स के डेडलाइन से पहले ही क्लाइंट कॉल करेगा, एक दिन पहले, because they don't plan. You know, हमारे जीन्स में यही है. We just do everything at the last minute. Planning तो दूर की बात है यार. Deadline meet हो जाए वही बड़ी बात है ना? But you know, this is the problem. The problem is that we don't do enough planning, and the general thoughts on planning are, if we do this thing right, we will achieve what our real objectives are. हम क्या करते हैं, हम भूल जाते हैं ऑब्जेक्टिव. We jump in the deep end and we do some audits, कुछ गलतियां निकाल के लाते हैं, क्लाइंट के पास लेके जाते हैं, वो भी दुखी हो जाता है. वो उसको पहले ही इतनी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, हम उसके पास जाके और प्रॉब्लम्स उसके सिर पे रख देते हैं, हम दोनों दुखी होके मीटिंग खत्म करते हैं. That is not the way we need to do these things. So we have to do it in a methodical way. We do it in a focused. What we have to do is to start with the objective. अरे हम कर क्यों रहे हैं, ऑडिट क्यों कर रहे हैं, हमें क्लाइंट से मैंडेट क्या मिला था? If you are working for a company, why has the company employed you? वो आपको क्या मैंडेट दिया कंपनी ने? कॉस्ट सेविंग करनी है, या कंट्रोल्स को स्ट्रेंथन करना है, या audit committee को खुश करना है? I mean, what is your real mandate? We have to start from there, my friends. And then what we have to do is to make a plan so that we can have a unity of purpose and direction. हम सबको पता होना चाहिए, पूरी टीम को पता होना चाहिए हम कहाँ जा रहे हैं, किस तरफ जा रहे हैं, और क्या अचीव करेंगे वहां जाके. We have to build ownership with the team. Agenda पता होना चाहिए सारी टीम को, क्या, why are we doing what we're doing, and then of course we have to do it in a risk-based fashion, because we have to anticipate and prevent the issues that come in the way. Okay, if you are going to do, like I gave you the example of अगर आप निकले और जयपुर पहुंच गए, अरे वो risk क्या है? Why would that happen? That may happen because we did not anticipate getting on the wrong bus. Okay, we did not anticipate that the Google Map, we're not using Google Map to get the right directions. So we have to anticipate and prevent the issues, which is why we want to do this planning. Then we of course do map our whole journey from start to finish. हम कब क्या करेंगे, क्यों करेंगे, कैसे करेंगे, और कौन हमारी टीम पे होगा, और वो क्या काम करेंगे. That is all part of the planning exercise, and we have to include in that planning exercise of innovation and creativity to do our jobs in a better way. Every time we do a planning, an audit, we have to improve from the last time we did that audit. So that is the whole agenda, and those are the kind of things that we bring into the planning exercise. And of course, at the end of the day, we have to control and evaluate our performance. If we don't have a plan, ठीक है, ऑडिट खत्म हो भी सकता है, बट उसमें हम क्या कुछ व्हाट कुड वी हैव डन बेटर, वो सब डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं होता. प्लान होगा तो पता चलेगा इफ वी डिविएटेड फ्रॉम द प्लान, क्यों डिविएट किया था. सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, व्हिच इज व्हाई आई वांटेड टू शेयर अ फ्यू थॉट्स विद यू ऑन जनरल. दिस इज ऑफ कोर्स नॉट पार्ट ऑफ द स्टैंडर्ड्स, एंड आई एम ब्रिंगिंग इट अप सो दैट यू गेट अ ब्रॉडर पर्सपेक्टिव. ओके, नाउ I will get focused on the standards so that you at least have a decent idea of what the standards are covering. I will not go through it in very much detail because, of course, you know, the details are there in the standard itself. What I will do is I will try to highlight the important things because, see, plans are worthless, but planning is very invaluable. एक बार plan बन जाता है, it may not be very much required because the planning has happened. Okay, so now what are the standards saying? Standards are saying, and wherever you see these on my screen, you see numbers 1.1 and so on and so forth. That means that I've copy pasted the standard. So everything is verbatim here. I am not trying to deviate too much from the literature, but at the same time, what I want to do is to make sure you understand the essence of the whole standards. And my submission to you would be that I will be running through it because I only have 15 minutes per standard, but you please take the time to go over the book, the compendium, in very much detail, because that is only the time you will be immersed in the understanding properly. So what the standard says that the planning is a two-tiered exercise. Okay, there's an overall audit plan that we have to do for the whole entity, and it is usually done once a year, and it is done for a period of time, a longer period of time. And the job of this is to present it to our bosses, like the board of directors or the audit committee, the governing body as it's called, so that they can approve that plan and give you the marching orders for the full year. कि भाई इस साल में आपको ये सब कुछ करना है. That is what the 220 covers, the big picture stuff. Okay, and then of course you have a lot of individual assignments that you have to undertake during the course of the year. And those little assignments are basically covered by 310, because in each of those assignments, you have to make your own little plans so that the assignment is done properly. Okay, that is basically the approach the standards have taken. And of course, the numbering system you may have noticed in the standards, 220 is basically covering the area, a general area, which is called managing the audit. What is it called? Standards on audit management. They are basically at an entity level. Okay, engagement level. So if you're an outsourced auditor, for example, if you have a client, you will have one engagement for the whole year with that organization, and that engagement is broken up into many little assignments, and that is what's covered in 300 series. In 300 series, the standards tell you how each assignment is to be conducted, which is why they've given it a separate series number, 300 series, which are on standards on how to conduct audit assignments. Okay, Ji. So that is the way the planning area is divided, and we're covering, of course, both of them today. And what time have I got? Okay. So let's start with also the fact that planning actually is a legal expectation. Okay, even the Companies Acts against which we do the audits and against which we get appointed by the listed companies, for example, this Companies Rule 13.2 comes into play, which clearly says that it is the job of the audit committee of the company or the board, which shall, in consultation with the auditor, formulate the scope, functioning, and periodicity and methodology for conducting the audit, internal audit. So what the law says is that your board has to decide what the internal auditor will do, what his scope will be, what kind of functioning he will do. मतलब वो किसको report करेगा, कहाँ, कितनी बार audit करेगा, periodicity, मतलब एक बिजनेस यूनिट को एक बार करना है या 4 बार करना है या 2 बार करना है, या एवरी मंथ ऑडिट करना, पीरियोडिसिटी भी बोर्ड डिसाइड करेगा। और ऑडिट करते समय कौन सी मेथोडोलॉजी यूज करनी है, रिस्क बेस्ड मेथोडोलॉजी करनी है, सिस्टम्स बेस्ड मेथोडोलॉजी यूज करनी है, ये सब कुछ बोर्ड की जॉब है। द बोर्ड हैज टू टेल द इंटरनल ऑडिटर, ऑफ कोर्स दिस इज व्हाट द लॉ सेज। नाउ रियलिटी में थोड़ा डिफरेंट होता है, वी ऑल नो दैट। इफ यू डन एनी इंटरनल ऑडिट्स, you know, you as the internal auditor are basically driving the whole agenda. You as the internal audit are doing all the mind applications that is defining the scope of your work, the functioning of your work, the periodicity of your job, and of course the methodology that you will use. So in a way, it is you telling the board, and the practicality of the whole thing is that you're the one as the internal auditor who will put the plan together and get the board to approve it, so that the board can comply with the law and say, yes, we as the audit committee have decided that this is what the internal auditor will do. Here is the approval that we are giving to the plan that we have reviewed. Okay, so that's the way it all actually works, and the standards acknowledge that. The standards recognize the fact that the audit committee of the board takes the active support of the chief internal auditor to develop the overall internal audit plan in consultation with executive management. Of course, management को बिना बताए तो हम नहीं decide करते, उनको उनसे कंसल्टेशन होती है, उनसे इनपुट्स लेते हैं, डिसाइड ऑफ कोर्स इंटरनल ऑडिटर करता है, और अप्रूव बेसिकली audit committee करती है. That's the practical approach that is taken to comply with the law. Now, this funnel approach has to be adopted whenever we do our planning. This is not part of the literature. I'm just presenting it to give you a pictorial view of how the overall planning approach gets executed in a funnel approach. There is an organization universe which has a number of locations, functions, business units, legal entities, and these separate locations and functions and business units all form part of the organization universe. उसमें से कुछ हम auditable units निकालते हैं. For example, we may have a business unit that is in the steel business or in the power business, or it's in doing something else. Real estate में investments हैं. It could even be CSR activities. So this whole universe that includes everything that the company does is the agenda that we start with. But then we say, well, look, we can't audit everything, and neither is it our job to audit everything that moves in the company. Our job is to identify what are the auditable units, and therefore we will take a call based on the risk assessment that we do, that which auditable units will form part of our annual internal audit plan. So is there some of the things we drop out? For example, we may say locations जो है, we will only do domestic locations. We will not do international operations. For example, it's not me, I'm saying we. The board will decide, of course. The board may tell the auditor, but don't worry about international operations, you just focus on domestic operations. Or don't worry about the other peripheral businesses, you just focus on power, or you just focus on cement, or you just focus on some other business unit, whatever it is. Or they may decide there are some functions that need not be audited. For example, there could be as far as functions goes, normally every function gets audited, but there could be some peripheral functions like gardening or housekeeping. These are low materiality functions. The board may decide, let's leave that out of the auditable unit universe or whatever. So, or there might be some legal entities. There's a trust. There is a foundation for conducting CSR activities, and they say, okay, isko this may not be part of your scope. Aap isko rehne dijiye. You just focus on the main business or whatever. So as you go along and develop your internal audit plan based on the risk assessment and the inputs from management, promoters, the board, you may be leaving some things out, and based on the risk evaluation and the resource available to you, you will create your annual audit plan, which we will discuss in 220. And out of that annual audit plan, there will be a number of assignments that will come out. Normally, you will have enough audit assignments happening throughout the year, which will be at a minimum, for example, 12 audit assignments. But if you have a number of people, that may be even 200 audit assignments, depending on the resources that you have. So all these audit assignments are individual assignments like little projects that you will conduct, and that gets covered by 310. Okay, so that is the funnel approach we take. And basically, the universe can be also something that you capture on a screen, on a spreadsheet. I'm just giving you a quick snapshot of how the universe can be captured. For example, we discussed governance. Governance may be a business cycle that we're covering. It have a number of functions like human resources or I mean, a whole lot of finance, all these kind of departments are there, and we may identify some of the activities that have to be covered. Again, you saw it in the standards, how various activities are forming part of governance, and there were sub-activities. We do a risk rating on each one of them, and so on and so forth. And that is the way that we identify what gets included or excluded from the scope, and that's the way audit universe gets evaluated. So most planning exercises at a high level will start from the universe in this way. So anyway, moving along, it's very important that enough time and attention is given to planning. For example, Abraham Lincoln said that if you give me 6 hours to chop down the tree, I will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe that I will use to cut that tree. That is the extent of the importance he was giving to planning. Now, of course, in audit, we don't have that kind of luxury to spend that kind of time on planning. But what we should do, for example, that if I have a 1 week assignment, that I at the minimum spend 1 day doing some good, comprehensive, thorough planning. So 1 day would be, your 20% of the time has to be devoted to the planning exercise. Of course, it all depends on what kind of time you need to do the audit procedures. That may take 2-3 days, and then you will need at least a day or so for the reporting. If you're talking about a 1 week assignment. So my point is, you have to make sure that you are doing enough, paying enough attention to the planning exercise in terms of time and due importance. Let's quickly cover 220 because we're running out of time. In 220, the key elements of the high-level planning, overall internal audit planning says, it should be undertaken before you even start the year. So if my fiscal year starts in April, at this point, January, February, I should be doing my planning for the next fiscal year, 2-3 months beforehand. It should be comprehensive in nature, meaning it should cover the entire entity. It should be directional in nature, meaning it should tell me which auditable units am I covering, which am I not covering, and how often I'm going to cover which business units and so on and so forth. And it's done by the chief internal auditor or the engagement partner if you are the outsourced agency. And the reason for pointing out these high-level positions is to make sure that enough importance is given to the planning exercise. In other words, you should not expect the chief internal auditor or the engagement partner to delegate this work. It's important, and that's why it's highlighted as the people who are responsible for doing it. And then once you've done it, there should be a concrete output in the form of an overall internal audit plan for the year. Okay, that's what the basically the key elements of the plan are. The objectives are that they should be aligned to the objectives of the plan should be in line with the objectives of the internal audit function. Why do you exist in the first place? Why did you get appointed in the first place? When you get hired as an internal auditor, you were given a mandate. That mandate should be in writing. For example, if you're an employee, you should have a charter, which is what the standards also cover. If you have outsourced, you should have an engagement letter, which will give you the mandate. So whatever plans you do, it has to get aligned to the mandate. Then you should take a risk-based approach. You should do a risk assessment and it should identify the important areas. Okay. And it should, whatever you should do, you should make sure that the plan includes the scope, the methodology, and the depth of coverage, and those kind of things. Depth of coverage is usually periodicity as well. So that is one way to ensure depth of coverage. Fourthly, you should have enough resources who are skilled and who get deployed in the right areas, focus in the areas, and the areas should, of course, be high-risk areas. And lastly, the objective of doing any plan is to make sure that you do it in accordance with the requirements, in conformance with the pronouncement, basically comply with the standards. Okay, so that is the objectives of putting this plan together. And of course, then the requirements come into play. There are 3 pages of requirement. I'll quickly go through it. But like I said, these requirements are telling the professional what is expected of the professional, the auditor. Okay, they don't focus on the how can be done through your own checklist or through any guidance material. But the institutes expects each auditor to make sure that when he is doing planning, he is doing it in accordance with these requirements. Number one, there is a process that you have laid down in how you will do your planning. Okay, in other words, should a process-driven approach that you take. And this process should have an outcome of a written document, which has all the key elements. Now, the institute, of course, in the standard tells you what are the key elements, but it doesn't necessarily tell you how you will do those elements. For example, in the key elements, it says technology deployment should be properly covered. Technology deployment means how the company is deploying technology, and how you as an auditor are going to deploy technology in your audit work. Both of those things. Resource allocation. How are you allocating resources to the audit process? Do you have the right people to do the right jobs? If there is a need for auditing the IT area, do you have an IT expert who understands IT very well? If there is a need for some forensic work, do you have a forensic professional to do that part of the work? So those are the kind of things you need to look at. Secondly, it says that once you've completed your overall plan, you shall have it reviewed and approved by your bosses, the highest authorities that you report to, like the board of directors and the audit committee. Thirdly, it says that the planning that you do, it should include the knowledge of the entity as one of the key elements that we mentioned earlier. Knowledge of the entity is very important. Discussion with management is very important. A discussion with other stakeholders, not just management, but the other stakeholders is very important. It says that number 4, that you will consider the whole universe. And in that evaluation of the universe, you will establish the scope. Meaning, scope का मतलब क्या है? क्या छोड़ रहे हो और क्या include कर रहे हो? That is the scope. You have to make a conscious decision if you're not going to audit anything, or if you are going to audit something, it has to be a conscious decision. And this scope should be in line with your goals and objectives. And the scope should also be in line with the nature and extent of the assurance that you're giving. See, we as auditors are engaged to give senior management or other people the assurance that everything is okay. That assurance is the outcome of all the work we do. Normally, this assurance is given by issuing a report with recommendations. So whatever scope we establish, it has to be in line with that assurance. Number 5, you should take a risk-based approach. Why? Because you have to prioritize your work and you have to make sure that due attention is given to important areas, that you're not all over the place, that you're only focused on the important things. So priority digao, pehle kya karoge, baad mein kya karoge, और due attention होना चाहिए. High risk है या medium risk है या low risk है. हाई रिस्क को ज्यादा आवर्स जाएंगे, मीडियम रिस्क को थोड़े कम, और मिनिमम रिस्क, मीडियम लो रिस्क को बहुत कम टाइम जाएगा। इस तरह आप रिस्क बेस्ड प्लानिंग करेंगे। और नंबर 6, the universe and the plan has to be continuously monitored. ये नहीं कि अब प्लानिंग हो गई, ऑडिट शुरू हो गया, अब भूल जाओ सब कुछ, नहीं, आपको प्लान को कंटिन्यूसली मॉनिटर करना है। अगर आप प्लान से डिविएट कर रहे हैं तो आपको उस डिविएशन को फिर से इवेल्युएट करना है, ये डिविएशन ठीक है कि गलत है। अगर फंडामेंटल डिविएशन है तो प्लान को मॉडिफाई करके रीअप्रूवल लीजिए प्लान का। ये स्टैंडर्ड्स कहते हैं। स्टैंडर्ड कहता है कि आप ऐसे ही नहीं चेंज कर सकते प्लान, आपको प्लान को फॉर्मली मॉडिफाई करना आना होगा, क्योंकि प्लान पहले अप्रूव्ड है, उसको डिविएट कर रहे हैं तो बोर्ड को फिर से बताना होगा कि हमने प्लान को डिविएट किया है, आर यू ओके विद दैट डिविएशन और नॉट। That is what standard says. And then finally, any significant modification has to also be consulted with the people who approve the plan, और उनको communicate किया जाना चाहिए। That is the 6 requirements that are there in this standard 220. Okay, I'll give you some examples now so that you understand this very well. मेरे पास 15 मिनट है अभी, 2 मिनट मैं दूंगा। एग्जाम्पल्स बहुत जरूरी होते हैं। आप मैं ना आई वोंट नेम द पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक, बट यू विल अंडरस्टैंड, द स्मार्ट पीपल, यू विल नो दैट इफ यू आर एन ऑडिटर ऑफ अ बैंक एंड इफ द बैंक ऑडिट वर्क does not include looking at contingencies, then you may be missing something. The universe of a bank includes any contingencies that the bank is assuming. For example, IOUs, MOUs that it signs with other parties. Now, contingencies are what? They are not recorded on the books accounts, because that we were talking about had a number of contingencies that were actually noted just in the notes to the accounts, but in reality they were actually very high risk contingencies that finally did fructify and became liabilities. But because they were done in a very unethical manner, they were done in a very surreptitious manner, they were actually irregularities and turned out to be eventually fraudulent transactions, because they were not recorded on the books of accounts, and eventually the bank had to pay those liabilities to these parties who were given these loans overseas or whatever. So my point is, scope बहुत important है। आपको पता होना चाहिए आप contingencies कर रहे हैं कि नहीं कर रहे हैं, आपके स्कोप में है कि नहीं है। And you have to be very consciously then agree with the client कि भाई ये हमारे स्कोप में है और ये नहीं है। Engagement letter में clearly mention कीजिए। Objectives, second example, alignment with objectives. Review the profitability of the plan. For example, if your scope includes helping the company find cost saving opportunities, maybe that's part of your objectives or not, I don't know. But if it is, then what will you do? You will make sure that you will look at where are the profits coming from. Okay, you will look at their P&L and find out, is the margin increasing or decreasing? If it's increasing, that's good news. The company is making more profit. But if it's decreasing, why is it decreasing? Are the price of the selling product is coming down? Or is the cost of the raw material is going up? And if those things are happening, why are they happening? And then you will do a analytical analysis and part of your planning exercise to make sure that your audit gives due coverage to the fact that the margins are increasing or decreasing, so that your observation can get focused on your objectives of cost saving, and you can highlight some good points that will give examples of what the company can do to improve the margins over a period of time, because they are buying more expensive things, or they are selling or discounting more, or whatever these things are that are hurting the margins. You can get focused on coming up with observations that will help the company improve its margins. Thirdly, if you are looking at the plans of the company and you see that they're putting up projects that includes some engineering works, Do you have the people to audit those complex areas? Maybe you need some engineers on your audit team, some civil engineers or some electrical engineers to be able to analyze whether the costs being incurred to ensure that the project is done in a most cost efficient manner, that these engineers can point out any wastage and things like that. Okay, so these are some of the examples I'm giving you on how you will do your planning exercise in a more meaningful way. I will now rush through the 310, which is pretty similar to 220, but it's at an assignment level. These are the little projects that come to you. They were generally maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks per kind of projects, assignments. And if you go through the elements, now I will rush through it because it's very similar to the previous one. It's basically a subset of the overall internal audit plan. Like I told you, your overall audit plan will be for a year, but the assignment plan will be a number of these little assignments. And it's taken, this planning is done just before the assignment starts, and it is for a specific to a particular part of the audit to the company. This part is generally called an auditable unit. It could be a location, it could be a function, like I told you earlier. Okay. It will be function as well, like looking at the IT department. It could be an IT HR function. It could be a legal entity that is just involved in one part of the business or something, or it could be a location that is only a plant location, or it could be a just the sales function or whatever it is. Okay, so it is very specific in nature, and it is generally completed in a short period of time of, let's say, a week or two or whatever, maybe a month or something. So it's done by the internal auditor who's going to actually do the assignment, and we'll get it approved by the boss, who is generally the head of internal audit. The outcome of this planning exercise, assignment plan. Okay, internal audit assignment plan is how he will prepare the planning documents. Objectives are very same. Like earlier, it has to align to the objectives. The scope of methodology has to be done. Time and sources and the skills of the people. What audit procedures will you do, and you will do it in accordance with the standards. Very similar to the previous one, but at an assignment level. That's the only difference. Again, requirements I will run through. It's very similar to the previous one. You will do this assignment planning with a laid down process. You will have an end product of written documents called a plan, and there are essential elements to the work you will do. The elements include technology dependent, resource allocation, and the fact that you, whatever you plan, you have to get it reviewed, approved by the boss. You may be the boss, may be the engagement partner if you are an outsourced service provider. Again, requirements are very similar. You will do the actual work after understanding the auditable unit. You have to have a comprehensive knowledge of it. This knowledge you will derive by doing your own analysis work, and also by discussion with management and the process owners. And you will exchange relevant information with them. In fact, you may also be required to exchange information with the statutory auditors, because 610 has some requirements which you need to incorporate as part of your internal audit procedures. You will do your planning on a risk-based methodology, which makes you focus on the priority areas and the fact that you give due importance to high, medium, low risk areas. Your methodology and procedures need to be defined, and you need to communicate your plan to the auditee. Some part of it, not everything. You have to communicate to the auditee because they have to supply some information to you. So at a minimum, you have to communicate the list of requirements of what you need from them to allow you to do your audit work. And you need to continuously monitor and modify the plan as you go along. So look at the requirements. They're very similar, like I mentioned earlier, just the fact that you have to do it at a lower level, assignment level, the auditable unit level, which may be just a small part of the overall company. So there you have it. The process is there, outlined there. Because I'm running out of time, I'm not going to discuss this. Most of it I've already discussed. But if you have any questions, I will elaborate on it. In conclusion, let me just say that planning is the most critical part. I think Gautam also started my presentation by emphasizing how important planning is. And in fact, he also mentioned it is one of the most critical part of the audit assignments that we do. And the fact that this has to be done in a very methodical manner. Planning exercise has to be conducted, just like the way standards tell us, a process-driven manner. And you have to do it in a two-tiered way, a long-term, high-level, and a short-term assignment level. That is one of the key messages that is coming out. And the planning has to be aligned to the mandate given to us, whether we are an in-house function, we will have a charter telling us what our mandate is, or if you're an outsourced function, the engagement letter will tell us what the mandate is. But whatever we do, it has to be aligned to the objectives of why the audit is done in the first place. And the process of planning has to be very comprehensive, detailed, and methodical, covering all the key elements, including technology, including understanding the business, including the budget reviews and financial analysis, meeting the people, talking to the people, looking at the process that is there, getting an idea of how technology is deployed, all those kind of things. They're all key elements. But the checklist is your job. All the work that you have to do, the how, that's us. We as professionals will decide. The standards are not telling us that. That's left up to us. It's our best. Now, the planning is also doesn't stop when we are ready to start the audit. The planning goes on till the end of the assignment. It's an ongoing exercise. It gets modified along the way, and so on and so forth. So it's very important that we keep our eyes and ears open and keep modifying the plan as we go along, because we may find that something we thought high risk is actually a medium risk, or something we found was a low risk is actually a high risk because it's very fraud risk prone. Okay. The example I gave earlier, somebody might say, no, leave out the CSR. CSR is a small piece of the pie, but it's not very important. 1 करोड़ खर्च होता है, हम तो 1000 करोड़ की कंपनी ऑडिट कर रहे हैं, 1 करोड़ में पैसा टाइम मत लगाना. But we may find, अरे CSR में तो frauds हो रहे हैं. So, because of the sensitivity and the integrity issues and the fact that there is a potential fraud area, we may choose to modify our plan and include CSR in our plan as we go along. But before we do that, we need to get the modification approved by the people, the top guys. And we will tell them, we're including CSR because we suspect fraud in this area, and so on and so forth. So that is why it's very important that you keep revisiting your plan as you go along. Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover. I wanted to give enough time to question and answer, and Gautam rightly mentioned that we will come back to that. And I think Mr. Kothari is also with us so that we can maybe jointly take any questions and answers that you may have. And I think we're going to open the floor to over to you, Gautam.
So thank you so much for the absorbing session. Sir, having these webinars, particularly on second half of the working day, can be a little taxing, but your distinct way of taking it really made it very fascinating. Both the speakers, we are so thankful to you for this brain absorbing session. So thank you so much for having these webinar for us.
Did anybody come up with any questions? Any questions?
I would certainly come up if I come across any question.
Okay. I just thought that if there were questions that were put, there's nothing in the chat box. Yes, I see. But if anybody has sent any questions to you, by all means, we can take those questions now. Or you can always, of course, send the questions to the branch or the ISB team. Shivani is here, and you can drop any emails. Anybody has any questions, you can drop emails to us. And I will have a little parting thought also before we wrap up. So anything, carry on with your anything else you need to cover?
So that is all. I would like to thank and congratulate the Committee of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICI, Chandigarh branch of NIRC of ICI for this webinar. I'm sure the learning from this webinar has enriched us with ample of knowledge and understanding on these standards on internal audit.
Okay, I just have some parting thoughts. I want to just leave a message with everybody who's signed up for the agenda today, is that we are always looking for professionals like you to come forward and contribute to the profession. We find that...
Once again, sir, please hold on. Sir, please wait for the Gyan Mishra, sir.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot. I'm very sorry. I forgot that there was a closing remark.
Okay, sir. Please wait for 5 minutes. He'll join, sir.
Oh, okay. No problem. If there's any questions, we can take from the floor. So, Mishra sir is coming for the closing remarks. Shivani, that's what you're saying, no?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect.
He will join within 5 minutes, sir. Please wait for him.
Meanwhile, sir may continue with his remarks, which Hariji was mentioning.
Yeah, I was just saying that if anybody is wanting to, work with the institute, you're most welcome to, approach the ISB or the branch and come forward and render your volunteering efforts. We are always looking for a lot of inputs from everybody. Thank you.
Sir, I think we have CA Gyanchand Mishra, sir, with us. He is the Central Council member of ICAI and Vice Chairman of Internal Audit Standard Boards. I would like, sir, to give the concluding remarks. Sir, off to you.
So, thank you very much, moderator of today's program, CA Gautam Soni ji. In absentia, the chairman of the Internal Audit Standard Board, Charanjot Singh Nanda, sir. And of course, two learned speaker of today's program, Nayan Kothari ji and Harish Dua ji, my good friend and chairman of Chandigarh branch, Anil Kakkad ji, and all the participants. Good evening to all of you. Friends, we all know that IASB organizes program on every Wednesday and every Saturday for last so many years. And the standards on internal audit, keeping pace with reforms. This is basically a tagline under which the program is being organized. Today's program has been organized on SIA 140, 150, 220, 310. The most important part that I would like to tell that is of utmost importance and to be taken care that compliance with the laws and regulations. NOCLAR has come into the picture, and now the chartered accountants are supposed to pay their attention while the audit function other than the financial acts and laws. So now the chartered accountants need to take care of the areas which were earlier, they were not supposed to take care. Suppose there might be some issue related to the trademark, related to the labor law, related to the civil law, criminal law, or insolvency law, or any other law which has any impact on the functioning of any business organization, then the auditor has to ensure that the same is being followed toto. Friends, we are trying at our best to provide best of the faculty for the programs, And I request all the members that if anyone is desirous of speaking on any, program, then they may kindly send their profile to the board, and we are considering some new faces for the programs as well. I'll not take much time. This is chilly evening in the northern India, and each one is at home, and temperature is 5 to 7 degrees across the northern Indian region. So in this chilly evening also, a lot of members who have joined, they are really the brand ambassador to carry forward the legacy of the profession in such a manner, so that the ultimate object of the auditing and assurance could be achieved. I congratulate and compliment to the board for such wonderful initiative from time to time, and of course the branch and moderator and all the speakers. I am thankful to each and everyone, and of course to the participants, without whom such programs can't be happen. So kudos to all. Good night. We will meet soon on Saturday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.